Forget about it. Yeah. I pay homage to the Buddha. I pay homage to the Dhamma. I pay homage to the Sangha. Well, I want to thank you all for being here today to hear me speak. I appreciate it. I hope I make it worth the drive. Maybe I should be wishing everyone happy holidays, since that's what's going on right now. I sometimes laugh at the fact that despite my not being Christian or my wife not being Christian, we're still putting up Christmas trees and drinking eggnog and dodging crazed shoppers at the mall because our families still celebrate Christmas, and so we do as well. And I find that it's an enjoyable experience to bond with family. It's a great time to practice generosity, and on the other end to practice humility and allow others to be generous towards you. Now, that isn't my topic today, but I felt that I needed to say something about it since it was on my mind this morning. But my topic for today is distractions and expectations in meditation. This topic came to mind while I was staying for a week at a Thai forest monastery in California. And this topic is mostly about my first day there, because I found that I came across some troubles in my meditation that first day. And it was a good reminder of what distractions and expectations can do to our meditation. And so I want to try to tie that into the 5 hindrances that are taught in meditation as hindrances toward meditation and hindrances toward deeper states of concentration. Now, when I went to the forest monastery, I did have expectations, because I thought, finally, I'm going to go somewhere where I can spend hours meditating, and it'll be in the forest, and it'll be quiet and peaceful, no distractions, no noises, no obligations, just sitting. It's going to be great, right? And I got there very, very early on a Monday morning, and people were just finishing up the morning sit and getting into the daily activities that happen in the morning at the monastery, which include, various chores that need to be done. I learned the futility of trying to sweep leaves in a forest, which is very fun, because once you're done with about 5 feet of it, you turn around and all the leaves are back, and then you go. And that was one of my chores for the entire week I was there, which was entertaining and good practice. I'm glad I had that one chore, because it really helped me remember how changeable everything is, and how impermanent everything is. I would sweep the roads and they'd look pristine, and then there'd be leaves all over again, and I'd sweep them, and then pristine, and then leaves. And then I also helped with the alms round with the monks, and that was a very fun experience, because that isn't done as often as it used to be, and in the West, it's even more rare for that to be done. And so that was an experience in and of itself. And I've been telling people how interesting it is to see a monk with his alms bowl and just plopping food right into the center of it, letting it all fill up to the top, and then shaking it so it all just settles back down, so you can put more in there, and all just sort of mixes together. And that in itself is a lesson on digestion and food and nourishment and our own preferences. So I went through all of that daily routine, and then finally the afternoon, there's about maybe 5 hours or so that you have completely to yourself. And so you can go into a platform in the avocado groves, find a nice quiet one, sit there and stay as long as you like until the evening, where they have more chores and various other things going on. And so that first day, I thought, finally, this is it. And I got my cushions, and I sat them right on the platform, and I sat down, and I thought, here we go. 5 days of just the deepest, purest meditation. The thing is, though, it's in an avocado grove filled with squirrels, which are the most Californian squirrels possible because they have a diet almost absolutely of avocados, which they munch on and then leave half eaten, rotting in the leaves. And so other animals come there, and then animals are defecating and everything. So you sit down peacefully, and then you get that nice waft of decay and excrement and flies. Peaceful. And I thought, okay, well, you know, that's what happens when you're in nature, and that's what happens when you're in an avocado grove. That's fine. And I sat, and more buzzing, and then the flies on my face. I'm trying not to move, and I thought, okay, that's fine. He's just hanging out. Starts heading towards my nose. Okay, wiping that away. Starts going towards my ears, trying to crawl in my ears. I swear I think that's what was happening. This fly was persistent, and I kept waving it away. And I thought, okay, that's just nature. That's just what I'm going to have to get used to. No big deal. I can handle that. And then I sat there, and then in the faint distance, I hear all of the construction crew's vehicles being turned on as they are working on the new road that they're building in the monastery grounds. So all of a sudden I hear the big trucks and all the shovels, and there's people talking and laughing as they work, and music starts blaring as well. And I know it well because I come from a Hispanic family, a lot of them contractors and construction workers, so they blast all that up. And so I'm hearing dun dun, like, I'm home. Like, why did I come to the forest? I might as well have stayed home. And it was right then I thought, of course, I really could have stayed home. It didn't matter where I had gone to, because wherever you end up, that's just where you are, you know. And I'm not the first person to say that, of course, but it's true. You're wherever you go, you know, you seek out distractions. So, you know, was the fly doing anything wrong? No, that's its nature. You know, the avocados rotting in the grove, that's its nature. These people, you know, this is their livelihood. They're building new roads for the monastery, which they need. The roads are very narrow. And this is all good thing. These are all good things happening there. But in that moment, I wanted this, and I wasn't getting it, and I got very frustrated because the reality of the situation was coming to a head with my expectations, right? And that's when I started thinking about distractions in meditation. When we sit down and various thoughts come up, various experiences come up, sensations, sounds from outside, we're the ones who decide that those are distractions. They're just phenomena in the world. They're just sensations. They're just more things happening, more information. And they could be an avenue of exploration, an avenue of investigation in meditation. But sometimes when we have this idea of how meditation is supposed to go, we find so much trouble there. We create so much trouble there. We create a story as well. I had a whole narrative about the workers down there. Like, what are they doing? And I bet some guys digging and the other guys doing. And when I would go back to the guest house where I was staying in the evenings, I'd take a look, like, what are they up to? Right? And that's how I knew they were building a road, because otherwise I wouldn't have known. I was all the way up the valley during the day. So the 5 hindrances are something taught in when we talk about meditation, because they come up. And so if you hear them and think about the little story I just told you, you'll see how they all exist there. So the first hindrance, right, kama chanda, right, is desire, right? That's how it's often translated, or it can be translated as desire, right? A desire for things to go a certain way. Usually it's sensory desire. You know, we want various feelings, we want various sensations, we have various cravings, and we're familiar with that because when we talk about the 3 unwholesome roots, we talk about, you know, craving, we talk about anger, we talk about delusion. So we're used to that concept. And it's the same thing with vyapada, which is aversion, right? Same idea. So in the very first 2, we have these very, very unwholesome roots of desire and aversion. And so when I think back to that first day when I was struggling, and it continued because even into the evening, in the evening they meditate in the main hall. So now I thought, great, the construction's done, no more flies, I'm inside. This room is completely sealed. You can't hear anything. It's in the forest at night, quiet. But you're in a room with maybe 15 other people. And it's so quiet that you hear every adjustment of the body. You hear every swallow. I didn't know people could swallow so loud. It was incredible. You know, someone passes gas, they try to pretend it's a cough. You know, that doesn't work. And so all these things are happening, and again, you're thinking, okay, here's my quiet time when I can have the deepest concentration, and then you have all these experiences. But they're just experiences. I had decided that those were getting in my way of my experience, right, of my meditation. I'm the one who created a narrative, because they're just phenomena. And it was amazing to just let all of that go. Let go of that narrative, let go of that story, let go of any of that tension. And other experiences happen too. When a room's that quiet, all of a sudden your ears, like little sounds that you start hearing, like ee, like all sorts of stuff happens, and that in itself can be very frustrating, and you have to let all of that go and understand that that is a part of the meditation. Because then we see that this craving, it's just craving. It comes and goes. This aversion, it comes and goes. They're just little stories we're telling ourselves, right? The third one is tina mida, which is usually translated as like lethargy or kind of sloth and torpor. And that came up in its own way as well, because I was doing some chores, and on the first day, one of the monks had asked, hey, do you mind digging some holes? And I thought, oh, that can't be that bad, sure. And it turns out that what he had in mind was trying to dig up some tree stumps. And I hadn't really been prepared for that, and I'm not really in the best shape. So I had to hike down a mountain with a shovel, try to dig out a tree root, and that didn't quite go as I expected it to. And then hike back up the mountain with the shovel, and by that point it was dark in a forest and I didn't know where I was. And so I managed to make it back to the main hall, and that's when I had the experience in the main hall. And that was fine, but then I was exhausted and sweaty and kind of nervous about being so close to other people because I was just drenched in sweat. I found out 2 or 3 days later that one of the long-term residents had to use a truck to pull the root out, and it took 3 tries. And he's like, that was really tough. And I said, yeah, I know. And so, you know, lethargy sets in because, you know, your body's worn out, and that's more sensation. And if you allow yourself to observe these things, you see that these stories, they're not important. They don't say anything about our reality. We have to pierce through those stories to just observe, to just witness. And then we become a little wiser because we see that when we can put those things aside, we're able to sit with things we didn't realize we were able to sit with. So when I went back to meditation the next day, nothing had changed. Still rotten vegetation smells and everything else, you know, tied to that. Still flies buzzing around. Still the music and the construction. And this time, some of the people driving the trucks got lost, so they were driving behind me and everything too. And you know, but it was just sensation. And for me, my focus in meditation is the breath. And so I had been working especially with the Anapanasati Sutta, where there are 16 contemplations, 16 trainings that one goes through, and it's supposed to lead to deeper stages of concentration, ultimately leading to insight and wisdom. And those first stages require you to really just focus on the breath and be with the breath, and other things begin to fade in the background, which is possible even when there's other things going on. But you have to be willing to put the story aside, put the narrative aside, and just let sensory input be sensory input. Just another thing to witness, to notice it's rising and passing away, and get back to your object of meditation. So the final two, and I'll just say these ones in English, are agitation and doubt. Going back to my story, there was a fair amount of agitation. Doubt came in the form of, why am I here? This couldn't possibly work, right? But of course it can, because we can meditate anywhere, and when we really apply the concepts of mindfulness and concentration to our practice, we find that we can really meditate anytime, any place. It's not always the sit-down concentration type, but mindfulness is something we can apply all the time. We can look at the various things happening in our lives and see the marks of existence. We can see phenomena. We can see, the 12 links of causation that lead to rebirth. We can see all of these things. And we have to just set aside our expectations of what meditation is supposed to be. So I think I had said before that distractions do not exist independent of the mind. Distractions are created by the mind. We may become aware of thoughts in the mind and sensations from within and without the body, but it is us who decide their distractions, usually based on our expectations of how our meditation is supposed to go. So the solution to this is to do away with the belief that meditation is ever supposed to go a certain way, that there is such a thing as a good meditation or a bad meditation. And I struggled with this concept of good meditation days and bad meditation days when I first started meditating years ago. And then again, when I started switching from Zen practice to Vipassana, because I had these ideas of what Vipassana was supposed to be in that case, and sometimes that would happen, and sometimes, more often than not actually, it wouldn't. And we can get really annoyed when we want something to go a certain way and it doesn't. So we read about meditation. Oh, it's so peaceful and so tranquil, everything just fades away and you just exist in this blissful state. And more often than not, you sit down, your mind's all over the place, your knees, your hips hurt, your back starts to ache. Sometimes boredom sets in, right? And those are all human experiences. When we can allow that to be, when we can allow the boredom to be, when we can allow the pain to be, and focus on our object of meditation, in my case again the breath, then it starts to ebb and flow. And at least in the case of pain, when I first started to sit, as you notice, I can't really sit in full lotus. I probably never will. I can't even do half lotus. I kind of do this almost, I think it's like what they call like Burmese or something like that. But even with that, I would have terrible pain in my leg. It would fall asleep. I'd have pain in my ankle and in my knee. I'd get up and I'd have like a limp for the first 5 minutes. And that was really distracting. And I was very concerned that I must be doing something wrong. And so I was trying to do stretches and doing all these things. And really, it just came down to the body needing to adapt through sitting, which meant in the meantime, I had to just let this leg just knock out. And if there were sensations there, that's fine, And over time, I found that I could sit this way hours if I need to, But the initial process of sitting with pain, we have that aversion come in. We don't want to sit with pain. We find it distracting to our meditation. So when we're sitting there breathing, or I know some people also use metta as a focus in their meditation. When we have that object that we're focusing on, we feel like we're being pulled away. We feel like all of a sudden we can't be with what this object is. We have to focus on this area. It's a distraction. It's something taking us away. What I have found is that there are two things we can do. We can observe the sensation, say the pain in the leg, and watch without judgment, without labeling the experience good or bad. And sometimes when we do that, we find that the pain is not a constant experience. We find that the experience is actually broken up into much smaller moments. And some of those moments are more intense than others. And we actually find spaces in between the pain where there's no pain at all. And then we observe that even further, and we see the rise and fall of that. And then the sensations themselves even begin to just fade. And then there's nothing. It's as if you don't even have a leg. What we can also do is sometimes we can focus on our object in a different way, with more determination. That can sometimes be useful too. It depends on how intense the sensations are. Some people, when they first start to sit and distractions come up, whether it be the mind or the body, even the smallest thing, they feel like that must pull them away and they have to investigate it. Sometimes small things, you can simply just change your focus. You can look and say, okay, there it is, and then just leave it alone. And you'll see the same process. It'll fade away on its own. So we learn of the more refined states in meditation, and we can sometimes become aggravated when we cannot reach those states, or they slip easily away when we do. The best way I have found to get to those states is to stop striving, to essentially stop caring if we are reaching those states. In the case of breath meditation, if my reason for bringing my attention to the breath is to reach some other state or have some deep insight, then it isn't very likely to happen. But if I bring my attention to the breath fully, with no agenda, no concern, no expectation, and with a relaxed effort, things seem to happen on their own without me having to try to do anything. And I found, surprisingly, a good example, or rather maybe a good analogy, of this effortlessness in a story that Chandana was talking about, I think like last weekend. And he was talking about how he had wanted a Bodhi leaf. And so he sat down to meditate. He had his palms open. And just by sitting there and meditating, the conditions were right. A leaf fell right into his palm. And I think about the fruits of meditation in much the similar way. I mean, you can start running around trying to catch leaves blowing in the wind, and maybe you'll catch one, maybe you won't. But sometimes all it takes is just sitting down and being with things as they are, and those insights can just fall right in your lap. So I think that's all I have to say on this topic, but I do want to leave time for people to ask questions on meditation they might be having at this moment, or talking about concerns or struggles, these distractions, or maybe their own experiences of the hindrances. Hopefully that might be helpful. Anyway, thank you for listening.